Episode 34 and 35, The Green Candle.
Part 1 and Part 2. It's kind of the most famous episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, I'd say.
I think Green with Evil would be more famous, but it's up there.
Right, this is one of those episodes that, even if you're only vaguely familiar with Mighty Morphin, I feel like you kind of know or have heard of Green Candle. It kind of changed the trajectory of the show in a way, again, that hasn't been seen since Green with Evil.
Plot starts with Tommy and Zach doing some martial arts practicing, and looks pretty good, actually. And, well, the Angel Grove the high school dance, I don't know if it was homecoming or prom, doesn't matter, just the dance. And Tommy wants to ask Kimberly, and he's super nervous. Zach tries to give him confidence by asking a girl out with his moves and gets shot down.
And we then have Bulk and Skull, who also try to, give their form of confidence.
They give him a poem. Roses are red, violets are blue. No one will ever go to the dance with you.
And, of course, they get, made fun of and mocked. And, it's a fun, lighthearted moment. It's nice to actually see a teen-oriented, story, because a lot of the times the teenagers with attitude in these early episodes feels more like middle school like a kid taught like how children would see teenagers, whereas this one actually feels like a legitimate Tommy is trying to ask him out on a date
to the dance,
right? So a very real human, like a human issue.
Well, real for some. This guy was a stud when it came to school dances.
No, I was not.
You always bragged to me you had 5 girls ask you to dance.
No, I did not.
Prom.
No, I did not.
Anyway. Tommy, Kimmer, Rita's... getting ahead. Rita's new plan. She's got this wand, little figure of her staff on a map. Not sure what it does in our version. In Sentai, that was her way of tracking down Burai's room where he escapes his time limit and destroys
in this version, it was used to track down where Tommy was. But it's very clearly a map that is not a map of California, seeing as how it ended up in some place called the Nomad Lands.
Yeah.
So...
Well...
It's a little silly, but the plot of the episode itself is actually solid and comes from quite a bit of forethought on Rita's part. Because, apparently when Tommy, the Green Ranger, was still working for Rita, he touched this very special magic wax that basically tied itself to his, Ranger powers. And so, apparently... after, 13 or so episodes, or however many episodes, they finally realize, oh, wait, we can burn this magic wax and steal the powers back. So Goldar actually does that. He kidnaps Tommy, basically to just keep him out of the fight and to distract everyone else.
And getting him in the room. Which apparently accelerates the candle burning.
Right.
Maybe they needed him there to finally activate it. It wasn't really said, but yeah.
And at the same time, they create this other monster, the Cyclops, and they use it to essentially distract the other Rangers from doing what's necessary to rescue Tommy and acquire the green wax.
They didn't actually know where Tommy was when he was captured originally. He manages... Pretty cool move. Tommy escapes by himself by stealing Goldar's sword.
Right, and it looks like the whole fight is actually really good. This is, this puts Tommy in just the best light. And it really does. I think this is one of the better episodes because everyone tries their very best. Everyone's putting their best foot forward, and I don't think it's much of a shock to anyone if you're in any way familiar with this episode, but, the Rangers fail, ultimately, at the end.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Part 1 ends with the Cyclops retreating and them all worried about what's going to happen with the candle.
Because,
Part 2, they come up with a plan to try to get it back.
Right, they come up with a plan to get it back. Bulk and Skull try to interfere
because they were in their spot in the park. You don't do that with bullies.
Right, but thankfully, the episode remembered that the issue is way bigger than some bullies, and they promptly get just flattened. Like the Rangers don't even bother.
You could tell they're all in a position where they can't tell them what they're doing, but they're in no mood to deal with them.
So it works out a lot better, I think.
Basically, they're gonna warp to there, send one of them in to try to get it. Tommy initially wants to go, but he can't because it would accelerate the burning. So Jason volunteers. And Tommy and Kim get a nice moment at the command center where Kim's like, "Don't worry, we'll handle this."
Right, and all the other Rangers kind of look away to give them their moment, which is a nice, sweet little gesture. It shows that there's actually a very good connection between all the Rangers.
Yeah, that's one thing the original cast did great was chemistry.
Right, I think that's what really helps to highlight this episode is you feel the loss of the Green Ranger. You know that it's going to fundamentally shift, and that the failure to acquire the Green Candle, because, Rita does a very smart thing and sent the Cyclops back out to attempt to distract the Rangers. So Tommy uses what little power he has left to keep the Cyclops busy.
He tries to fight him solo, and we actually get to see the Dragon Zord's cockpit for the first time.
Which, kind of funny that the theoretical first time, or the first time would also be the theoretical last time.
Yeah, theoretical last time. Sorry, a little hiccup there.
Yeah. So
Tommy puts up a fight. He does. He tries. The stock footage doesn't really have that much of him fighting solo, though.
Right.
So we see
but it
Jason.
Does still look good. It's one of the better fights, I'd have to say.
We see Jason struggle to get the candle back. I don't know why he doesn't morph, but I don't remember. Did that dimension interfere with their powers?
I think they expressed that the reason they send Jason is because in a previous episode, I can't remember which one.
It was Green with Evil. Jason got kidnapped.
Yeah. Oh yes, you're right. So Jason was the only other Ranger to have been in the Dark Dimension or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
So it kind of does a nice little loop around. To oh, hey, here's a nice little narrative element that's oh, this is why we have to do it this way. Because, I don't know about you, but given the way that this story was structured, I thought initially they would have had Kim be the one to go in and try to save the day. Since Kim and Tommy's relationship is such an essential part.
Oh, yeah. Like a 90s show would ever give the girl Ranger that much of a spotlight.
I know.
Not yet. Maybe later.
Maybe later, but...
if they wanted to match the stock footage, they would have... Because in the footage, it was sort of a race against time before Green Ranger died. Dragon Ranger and the Black and Blue Rangers, Tricera Ranger and Mammoth Ranger, were on a rush for this elixir while the others were fighting off. But they didn't have that. Yeah, they also didn't have fighting mode go. So I always thought it would have made sense to leave Kim behind to watch the portal and the other three go help first before resorting to getting Jason back. But again, they didn't have that footage.
And also, there's the question of time. Because I will say this. The last two-parter was Island of Illusion. And that episode really didn't feel like it deserved to be a two-parter. It felt like there was a lot of padding, a lot of unnecessary time waste. But this episode, it needed every minute it got. And even then, it didn't feel like it could have used some more time. They could have made it as a three-parter, I think. And I think it actually would have worked out even better. They could have had more dramatic moments. They could have had that slow build-up of them trying to get this candle, and they just cannot do it, making them feel a little bit more hopeless.
Wow.
But what I like is that this episode was ultimately tight. It used the time that it had, and it used it really well.
Episodes. Yeah. Well, ultimately, Dragon Zord can't defeat Cyclops on its own, and Tommy's life is in danger, so Zack goes into the dimension to get Jason, saying it's either his powers or his life.
Which is a very, very, it's a very, very poignant statement. And, it's showing the dramatic potential of Power Rangers. Yep.
Jason really is really reluctant. He doesn't even have his flair when he says it's morphin time. He goes, "It's morphin time."
Yeah, and it definitely feels like that this is an incident. This is like that moment in a Telltale game where it goes like, Jason will remember this in the corner after you make a decision. It's like, this will stick with him for a while.
Yeah, it does. Though they kind of ignore it until season 2, but we'll get to that. Because, well, they fail, but Zordon's got one less ace in the hole, you could say, to stop Rita from getting the powers, have Tommy give them to another ranger. And of course he chooses Jason because the stock footage demands it.
Though, again, that also feels like that could have been a first step. They could have just done that at the beginning. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, oh, we'll just give him the coin, and then whenever we figure out how to deal with the ranger powers, we'll give it back.
I made that joke many years ago. In Sentai, the Dragon Ranger ultimately dies, but right before he gives his shield and dagger to his little brother, the Red. Though, fun fact, in Sentai, the canon is that he stole the golden dragon armor, which is why he was the only ranger to have it. But that doesn't explain the gold ring on his gloves and boots that match it. That's just like an oversight on Sentai's part, not ours.
Though, ironically, this action of the Green Ranger giving the Red Ranger his, armor and whatnot actually kind of ends up creating that first, Red Ranger power-up that we usually see in later seasons, where
the armor upgrade.
The armor upgrade that the Red Ranger always, not always, but usually gets, towards the halfway or three-quarters part of the series.
The battleizers, usually.
Yep. So this is kind of the introduction of that trope.
It was Sentai's first time, too, with a ranger getting an armor upgrade, I think. Although, this was oddly enough one of the few times it came from stock footage, because battleizers and armor modes are usually original footage.
Right. So I think it's very cool the place that this episode has in the history of Rangers.
Well, everything wraps up. Rita's frustrated she didn't get the powers, but Green Ranger is still gone for now. But we get one last scene with Tommy and Kim by the lake, where Tommy finally gets the nerve to ask her to the dance.
They kiss. They have a great time. It's wonderful.
It's actually kind of wholesome. They have one little kiss, which is the only time for a very long time, I think, ever, that any couple in Power Rangers were allowed to kiss on screen. I don't know why they were strict about that. Even the Disney area wouldn't let them do it. Disney, they made their living off that.
Yeah, the True Love's Kiss and whatnot. That was Disney.
Yeah.
The height of Disney. So,
yeah, but we'll get to that.
I think it ultimately leaves this episode feeling kind of bittersweet.
Yeah, but at the same time, Kimberly does a nice girl moment where Tommy does work up the nerve. She turns her head at first, goes, I just didn't want to make it too easy for you. Of course I'll go.
Right, and they do the whole twirl in the air thing.
Yeah.
Happy ending.
Happy ending to an unfortunate event, like you said.
It ultimately, it leaves the episode bittersweet, but completely satisfying. This is, I genuinely think, one of the better episodes of the show. It shows exactly what I was hoping from Power Rangers. I wanted, well, yes, but the one story arc.
Yeah.
I wanted more dramatic storytelling. I wanted the consequences of being a Power Ranger to interfere with their normal human life. Tommy was trying to, ask Kim out on a date, and that got interrupted by the putties.
Yep. We get an more fight with Tommy and Kim against the putties and Goldar.
Which was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
It showed the best on both their ends. And of course, Kim and Tommy both end up being damsels in distress, because, ironically enough, the two of them are the most common damsels in distress.
Yeah, it's their chemistry. Well, we got to see briefly. He goes like this in Sentai to teleport in and out of the room. Dragon. But overall, this was originally meant to be the end of Green Ranger. If the original plans went through, in episode 40 would have been the finale, but it's not. But for what it is, what do you rate it?
I think I have to give it a 5 out of 5. This feels like a perfect Power Rangers episode. It told a cohesive story. It told it well.
Yeah.
It paced it well.
Yeah.
Great action, dramatic moments that have a lasting impact on the rest of the series.
Yeah, the only issues would have been resulting of lack of stock footage and maybe Bulk and Skull, but they weren't on screen that long, even though I didn't like them.
Right, and they didn't really serve much of a purpose, but they were a kind of necessary moment of comedy.
Yeah, and also bring the human element back to it all.
Right, bringing the human element, again, reminding us that these aren't, warriors in suits. These are teenagers with attitude. So, this episode, I feel like, it was exactly what it needed to be. And it ultimately ended up being just some of the best Power Rangers we have gotten up to this point.
Yeah.
It is just as good as Green with Evil.
The only thing I would change is instead of giving away his powers altogether, I would have made it to where he did just give away the armor and dagger to the Red before the powers were destroyed, because that'll make more sense in later on.
Yeah.
Because this implies that Jason now has double Ranger power.
Right, like, why is he not the Red and Green Ranger? Which we know why, because there isn't stock footage that would support being a Red and Green Ranger. But within the universe, the way they explain it,
okay,
they don't really explain it that very well.
So what color do you get if you mix red and green?
Brown?
We've never had a brown Ranger, which is a good
Haven't
thing.
we?
Not really, no.
Huh.
Who'd want to be the brown Pooh Ranger?
The Pooh Ranger.
Well, until next time, y'all. What is next? I don't even know.
Should be... Oh, wait, is it?
No, it's not.
No, that's not it.
That's okay. We'll figure it out. I'll put subtitles right over here.
Why here? Why not over there?
I don't know why.
Why not all this space up here?
Well, thanks for watching.
Yeah. See you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Rangers.